Hello, and welcome to Paradox Untold Stories from Athletic Directors, brought to you by Ticket Spicket, the official ticketing sponsor of the NIAAA. I'm Dr. Daniela Point, and my co host is Dr. Dustin Smith. Dustin, would you like to go ahead and introduce our guest today?
Oh, man, I'm excited about today, Danielle. I'm glad we're here and get to visit with a guy that I've gotten to know through the NIAAAU leadership, executive leadership cohort. Cole Kanyer is an AD out in Washington, and I've gotten to know him through this leadership cohort that we went through, and got to really just learn how he leads and how things are different in Washington, but also the same for what I'm doing in Arkansas. So I got a good friend, and I'm excited to have this podcast. Cole, I'm excited to have you on our podcast. And for those who are listening and are maybe geographically challenged, let's talk about where you are in Washington, where you are in the state, and what that looks like for you as an athletic administrator.
Well, thank you guys for having me on here. I said at the start of this thing that if this is the only way I get to hang out with Dustin, I'm in. So
his standards clearly aren't very high.
And Danielle, it's great meeting you, even though it's over Zoom. I can't wait to connect in person at some point too. So
yeah, that would be great.
In Washington, if you put a bullseye over the state of Washington, we are smack dab in the center of the state. So about 2 hours from Seattle, 3 hours from Spokane. About 4 hours about 3 hours from our southern border, about 4 hours from our northern border. So we're generally in farmland of Washington on the east side of the Cascade Mountains. So we have all 4 seasons. It's not always rainy like it is in Seattle. So we get cold winters and hot summers, and much of our area is farmland for sure.
Well, let's define, because Danielle lives in Florida, let's define cold winters and hot summers so she knows just kind of where we're at.
So, all right. So definition of a cold winter, we had 0 degree temperatures. Well, maybe not. I mean, single digit temperatures this winter. And then this last summer, we had a stretch of about a week where it was 115 degrees. So that's not
impressive.
Usual. 115 is not usual. It's normally in the upper 90s, 95 to 100. That's probably pretty normal in the months of July and August. So,
is it humid there, or is it just straight heat?
Dry, really dry.
Dry, yeah. Well, for me. I mean, I've gotten to visit with Cole through a multitude of Zooms. We got to meet in person at the state coordinator summit that we hadn't met in person. I didn't know Cole had arms and legs until we met in person in Indianapolis. But I've gotten to see how Cole works and got to see how Cole's mind works. And I'm excited just to visit with him about some of the stories that are in his world. They're a little different than maybe what we've experienced to this point. But what's cool about this podcast is it's all our stories and our individual stories. And so Cole's stories are his, and he lived these out. So I'm excited to get to dive into those. So Cole, what story do you want to start us with as far as what you've dealt with, whether that's either being a young AD or currently, what story is good for you?
Well, it's funny, as thinking about this and being nervous to follow up Becky Moran's story, just thinking about this, it kind of made me reflect and see how much growing through athletic administration is to growing through life, right? And childhood and adolescence and adulthood. I'm definitely not near adulthood in my 11th or 12th year now, but as a young AD, not knowing how to handle scenarios and being really scared, and then now having done it for a lot longer, scenarios are a little less frightening, but they're just as frequent as they were at the start. So,
and mind-boggling. You're like, what?
Yeah, exactly right. So, I guess the story that belongs to me as a young AD that I kind of shared a little bit ago was I had a young basketball coach, and I was a first or second year AD, and my basketball coach and I were friends with the principal at the school with who we were competing against. He was our former principal, and actually he was the principal of my basketball coach while he was going through school. So we all knew each other really well, but he was now our head basketball coach, and he was frustrated with one of the officials' call in a tight game, and so he throws his whiteboard pen onto the ground, and it's not the most strong pen, so it explodes a little bit, not like a bomb, but lid flies off onto the court, and the marker just so serendipitously rolls right over to the feet of the former principal, who's now the principal at this school that we're competing at. And so he picks this marker up and, obviously inspects it, and it's leaking. And then before too long, we realized it had leaked all over his white dress shirt that he was wearing at the event. Well, one thing that was not discussed at the start of this is the relationship that this principal at this new school had with his former superintendent. That was my superintendent at my school, and so things were not good. They did not see eye to eye on a lot of different things. So he felt it necessary to take his anger and frustration out on his former student and first, second year basketball coach and first and second year athletic director, and kind of made life a little hectic for us for a while. And he's a big man, probably 6'5", 250 pounds, I would say, and he liked to use that stature to intimidate a little bit, even though I think generally he's a very nice guy. But kind of called me over and said, we'll deal with this later, essentially, in not so certain terms. And essentially the outcome of that was a sit-down meeting with my superintendent, myself, and my basketball coach. We had two young guys who were sitting in the superintendent's office like it was just like being in the principal's office. We were in trouble and getting scolded, and how we were going to make it right. Well, we made it right by buying a new dress shirt for this guy and hand delivering it with a written apology and expressing our most sincere apologies for the incident happening itself. But
wait a minute, I need to make sure I understand what's going on. So you have to buy the new shirt, have like a little scolding meeting, right? Apologize for a pen dripping that you did not throw.
That's correct. I did not throw the pen. I did not throw the pen. My friend, and he was my friend, and as a young AD, not knowing how to handle a situation, I would have done the same thing, but he's under my supervisory role, I suppose. So yes, though I did not directly throw the pen, it was definitely my responsibility to try and make things right.
So let me ask this question, Cole. Is he still your friend, this said basketball coach?
He's still my friend, yes.
Okay. And would that going to the principal's office or the superintendent's office and having that discussion, what was that meeting like? I mean, was there just a text message that said be in my office at 8 a.m, or was it just he came and said, hey, come to my office right now, we're having a discussion? What was that discussion like where you got, hey, I know this is getting real, I'm going to meet with the superintendent right now?
Well, it's a little hard to describe for you guys because you can't feel the tension between that superintendent and her. It was a female and her former principal who left for this now new school. So there was just that tension. I think that they contrasted leadership styles so strongly that was one of the main reasons why he chose to leave that school. So there's definitely some extra emotion and feelings and thought and play as we're having this meeting. So it was a phone call. It was, hey, I need you to meet with me first thing on Monday or whatever day it was. I can't remember what night the game was on. And it was very much like a meeting with the principal's office. And I'm a rule follower, you guys. I did not spend a ton of time in the principal's office. So,
didn't handle it well.
No. So as a new AD, I'm shaking in my boots a little bit. My heart's racing about 150 beats a minute, trying to figure out, am I fired or what for this?
Well, and I think that's a great story to highlight because I think everybody can probably relate to you not having anything to do with the backstory or the chemistry or tension between, people and the politics that kind of go into the athletic director job sometimes. And you're just standing there and you're like, I'm gonna go get you a new shirt. I'll be back. Like
exactly right.
It's crazy. They don't have that in the job description, and there you are doing it. And it doesn't just happen to you; it happens to everyone.
For sure.
I want to ask this question: being in that meeting, and the tension's there, at what point was that a suggestion you made, the coach made, or the superintendent made about buying another shirt? How did it come to that point to where you decided that's what we're going to do?
That's a
And was
great
it gift
question.
wrapped?
Well,
Was it gift wrapped?
so being a second year teacher, third year teacher, coach, AD at the time, the pay was not outstanding. All right. So the principal and the superintendent obviously made like 3 times of what I was making. So we get in there, and it was very clear that the principal had demanded that we replace this shirt, right? This shirt was out of commission, and he demanded to the superintendent that we replace this shirt. Figure out a way. Don't care how it is, got to figure out a way.
Which still wasn't your fault.
Which still wasn't my fault. And it was a Nordstrom shirt, okay? I shop at Ross and TJ Maxx. I don't shop at Nordstrom, okay? So yeah, we figured out how to get him a Nordstrom shirt and buy it and replace it. But I mean, it was, like I said, it was very clearly demanded. Like, this is your mistake, and you will replace my shirt. Okay, we'll figure out a way. I don't know how it's going to happen.
So it was your mistake for.
Sorry, Dustin. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was your mistake for him picking up a pen that was thrown on the floor by your coach. And instead of holding it away from him or throwing it into a trash can, he just held it and got it all over his shirt.
Correct.
So you're replacing a shirt. Now, if it's from Nordstrom, did he have his initials on it or anything that you had to replace those as well?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. It was, yeah.
Well, I want to know what your conversation was like with your coach after your meeting with the principal and after all that. Was there a "you will not be throwing markers or pens ever again" type of statement?
It's funny. Like, I just used this statement the other day. One thing that has, I think, kept me in the profession of athletic administration is having a short memory. Like, I know I've taken a ton of abuse and I've forgotten half of it. So I don't remember the conversation that he and I had. It was not. I didn't know how to handle a situation like that. Is it a scolding? Is it a suspension? Is it a, hey man, don't do that again? Like, this guy was my friend. We were both right around the same age, and we're both 2 years into this gig. And so it was like, let's figure this out together. You're going to get some bad officiating sometimes. Figure out a way to handle that to where you don't have to throw a stinking marker and get me in trouble,
Yeah.
And there was no, I mean, in Arkansas, sometimes that happens and they give a technical foul because something goes onto the court if the coach misbehaves and in that fashion. So that's one thing that I would think through. But as you look back on it now, do you think you would have changed? I mean, obviously that conversation you don't remember. Do you think you would have changed how you approached that, either with the superintendent or with the coach?
1,000% yes. Like, we're talking about a tiny little marker, okay, causing this huge ordeal. And at the time, it was life or death, right? It was like, this is either my job or this is like, I'm going to get fired. I know I'm going to get fired.
I love that you put it that way, because so many ADs have felt what you felt in that time. And in the grand scheme of things, you're like, this isn't even a big deal, but it is in that moment.
For sure. And you know what? The thing is, the issue was not the marker. The issue was the relationship between the former principal and the superintendent at the time. That was the whole issue of the whole deal. And that's what made it such a big issue. So from 1,000-foot perspective or 30,000-foot perspective, whatever you want to say, and 11 years later, 12 years later, yeah, of course I would handle it differently. This is not a big deal. We'll figure it out. Coach, don't do this again. If you do this again, there will be some consequences, right? But figure out a way to handle your emotions more appropriately. You're going to get bad officiating from time to time. And guess what? Superintendent and former principal, figure your stuff out. Don't let this stuff affect other people, right? I mean, I don't know. It's easy to say right now. And if I was in my superintendent's office here at my new school, I probably wouldn't have that direct conversation. But knowing what I know now, it's like, man, we made such a big deal out of such a small issue. It was unbelievable.
So I want to go back to when you go purchase this shirt, which, if you're like me at 25 or maybe me even now, maybe I'm trying to collect money just to try to figure out how I'm purchasing this shirt instead of going to the superintendent and say, hey, will you pay for it? But what was the interaction like when you took him the shirt and the handwritten apology? Who wrote the apology first? And two, what was that interaction like when you presented it to him?
So I hand wrote my apology. My coach just apologized to him. He had a little more history with the guy at the time. So, and that was the same thing. It was going to the principal's office as a young guy who this guy was my boss for 1 year before he left to go to this new school. So, thinking at the time that he really liked me and thought I did a good job as a teacher and a coach in his building, and now going to a spot where he was going, listen up, you idiot kid, like you're not gonna behave that way at my new school kind of thing. And it's like, holy smoke. So I was nervous, of course. But and again, I think that he made it more of a deal than it should have been because of his relationship with the superintendent. But at the start of it, it was pretty clear, like, yeah, hey, this isn't going to happen again in my building. But by the time it was all over with, it was a discussion that was a discussion, and I think everybody very easily moved on after that. But once again, I think as we were having that discussion, you could just see the little smirk in his face, like he was ahead in the race. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Yeah, he got a win in his
yes,
mind.
yes.
Speaking
I,
of wins, Cole, did your team win that night? Did you get any
I don't
win
think
off
we did.
that?
No, I don't think
Ah.
we did.
but you think about some takeaways from that story, and we've talked about how you'd look on it differently at this point than what you did in that first or second year. But we're going to have people that listen to this that are in that first or second year that are trying to figure out, hey, maybe it's not a friend who's a coach. Maybe it's a more seasoned veteran coach who you have inherited as a leader. And does that dynamic change because of the relationship that you had both with the former principal, who's the principal at the other school, and your coach now? What does that interaction become now, 11 years later, 12 years later, or if you're in it 20 or 30 years? What does that conversation look like? And I think that's a takeaway for any of our ADs that are listening to this, to think, all right, life isn't as big as we make it out to be sometimes, and our situations that maybe we have zero control over, but it falls under our purview as an athletic director that this coach reported to you, but you had absolutely nothing to do with any of the events, and yet you're the one taking the peace offering and trying to make things right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you started that question off with relationships, right? Like anytime you go to somewhere new, or I don't know, it's just the most, in my opinion, the absolute most paramount thing that you can do as an athletic administrator is develop relationships with people, whether it's parents, whether it's coaches. And that's how you get to figure out how to best handle situations. If you establish a relationship with somebody and you have to go through something difficult, even if it's a throwing a marker or if it is, an accusation of something more difficult that you have to work through, um, that foundation of the relationship that you build with that person is going to determine how you handle the scenario. So, like you gave the scenario of a veteran coach. Depending on a lot of the other X factors and scenarios on how that would unfold, if this coach has a history of blow ups in games because of bad officiating, then we handle it differently than if it's a first time mistake. Um, but I think that again, the tenure in the position helps kind of see it from that big viewpoint and going like, this is not the most important thing in the world. And you kind of have that compared to what mentality, like we'll get through this just like we do everything else, and we'll go from there.
And looking back on it now, 11, 12 years later, you're thinking, I made a big deal out of something that was really a
Oh,
simple molehill. It wasn't a mountain, it was a little molehill. And I worried myself to death about something that really was not a big deal. And I think that's a big takeaway for me, is that sometimes we get so worked up in our position about a scenario that really isn't that big. Maybe it's big in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not really that big.
no, and that's something I have told myself a lot this year, and other people around me too. I'm good friends with an AD just about 25 minutes away. It's her first year as an athletic administrator, and it's like, this is not, high school sports are high school sports. Like it's not the most important thing in the entire universe that you have to worry about. Like, and she's getting beat up a little bit because we're in a COVID scenario and a difficult community. And it's like, man, just take a deep breath. Like, life will go on. This is such a small little scope of who you are. It's not even who you are, it's what you do. You don't need to worry this as much as you're putting that worry effort into it.
So if I take a marker right now and I spill it on my white shirt, do I get to blame you because it happens in a podcast? And are you going to buy me a new white shirt, Cole? Or is that something I just got to chalk up and not happen?
I'll say, hey, let me get that white shirt. I'll try and clean it off. And then you'll see me walking down the street with it on a little bit later.
You know what? I think your point about relationships is really good and really spot on, because I'm in Arkansas, you're in Washington, but I can pick up the phone or I can text you and say, hey, Cole, I'm dealing with this. And we have a relationship where you can say, hey, I would look at it this way. And I think that's what's really cool about our profession, is that we got connections all across the country. And we may not be dealing with the exact same thing in the exact same community, but there's advice that can come, and there's a relationship there where I've texted you several times, and I texted our group and just said, hey, we're dealing with this. How would you look at it? And maybe get a different perspective. And I think that's pretty cool about our profession, but that goes back to the relationships part of that, where you can pick up the phone and make a phone call and say, I'm dealing with this. I value your input. Share with me what you would think.
There's a lot of great things that came about with that NIAAA cohort. And I think you just hit probably the most important thing, is discussing scenarios and seeing what other people put as, like, essentially the foundation of it is you write a post and then you follow up to people's posts, right? So hearing what you wrote and then looking at your posts on the feedback that you give, how much learning, that's crazy amount of learning, like how you would handle a scenario or what you might do a little bit differently or whatever. Like, that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, was hearing from people who I trust now and what their perspectives were. And you take them or you leave them. But like you just said, now having that ability to go, hey, Nathan, hey, Dustin, hey, whoever, Meg, what do you think about this scenario? Talk me through this and how you would handle it.
And that's one of the things I really love about our structure of our podcast is the idea is that the whole country has similar, scenarios, and we can all learn it from each other and each other's experiences. So, I think it's great. And I think that's probably the number one learning tool that ADs need in order to get through, especially their beginning years.
And I think it's important for our people to be able to listen and say, hey, man, I like listening to Cole, and I think I share some of the mindset that he has. Maybe I'd like to pick his brain, and maybe they reach out to Cole and say, hey, Cole, I listened to you, and I don't know you from Adam, or you don't know me from Adam, but I value your insight on things, and how would you do this? And maybe that's a network that we're building, and hopefully through the podcast we're able to do that. So I appreciate you sharing that story. Do you have another one with us, Cole, that you want to, maybe it's not your story that we talked about before, but maybe a story that won't get us in trouble with PETA, but a story that maybe you dealt with that I'm intrigued by.
Yeah, for sure. But before I get there, I want to just say how important, like you just said, Dustin, creating that community of support systems, right? There's a reason why the lifespan of an athletic administrator is 3 years or something like that, or at least maybe that's just in Washington. But
no, it's 3 to 5 nationwide. It's 3 to 5.
Yeah, it's because people don't have support systems. Like, I have 3 of my best friends are my coworkers, my co-administrators in this building. And if I need to go shut the door and vent or say a couple swear words or whatever it needs to be, they're there for me, and we'll get through it together. Like, there's not, I'm not on an island. That's the thing. I think we fail to realize as athletic administrators. Sometimes we think we're doing it all by ourselves, but there's a lot of people there to support you.
Well, and I just want to capitalize on what you just said, because you feel like you're on an island because you're the only one on your campus.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't, sometimes, it's not as easy to talk to maybe your coworkers because they don't understand the policies that we need to follow or why we have to do something. So it is very easy to feel alone on your campus, but you just have to know, and you have to make the effort to know that you can reach out to people in your area or across the country and go to conferences. So that's just so important.
Sure. Well, this next story, you guys. So I mean, this story is going to unfold, and you got to picture it exactly how you're going to picture it, because that's exactly how it looked. I was not the athletic administrator at this event, but it was at my school prior to my arrival, and we played a school. It's a couple hours away, and there happened to be some. Uh, without giving too much information away, some nuclear ties to that school. And so some of our student body showed up in hazmat suits to kind of reemphasize the fan experience with our student body. And they were not transparent hazmat suits; they were white, and so nobody did any looking into it. And so what they brought in, however, came to light shortly after the game started when they let the chickens.
Wait, so kids just are, wait, I just gotta set the stage here. So kids are just like walking into the ticket line wearing like hazmat suits, and everyone's like, all right, like we're just gonna
So the student theme that day apparently lended itself to somehow, some way, commandeering these hazmat suits. Now, was it a hazmat suit or was it a beekeeper suit? I don't think I'll ever know. But the whole premise was to wear a hazmat suit. And so, unfortunately, what wasn't known at the time was that they were smuggling in chickens in those hazmat suits. And when the opportune time came, they unzipped the hazmat suits, and out come the chickens to run all over the basketball floor. And the AD at the time is now on the basketball floor in front of the whole crowd, chasing down these chickens and trying to get them off the floor. So,
how many chickens were there?
I think there was a total of 6 chickens that were smuggled in. Yep.
It's a lot of chickens.
Let me ask. I'm going to ask some obvious questions, or maybe obvious to me in my mind. But number one, that's not something you don't have a chicken detector. Like there's metal detectors, and so you don't have that in your thought process of, hey, this could really happen. I mean, looking back on it, you think about. I mean, obviously you weren't the administrator at that time, but you think about being in that situation, and what do? How do you prevent that from happening? I don't know if that you can. I mean, you got to give creativity points to the students for figuring out. Hey, but how do the my second question is, how in the world do you keep them still long enough to that nobody knows that there's chickens inside of you?
That's a fantastic point. It must have had a real quick entry into the gym so that nobody could hear any sounds or anything like that. But you know what? We do, like I told you before, we live in a farming community. So, some of these kids are really well skilled on how to handle chickens,
I mean,
So,
valid point.
you would think their talons or something would be scratching you or something.
Well, when listening to your story, my first thought wasn't, oh, they're smuggling in animals. That is not my first thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Kudos to the kids for their creativity. But yeah, you can't necessarily, I guess, to your point, Dustin, screen for chickens. Like that's not something you do.
When you think about even going back to Becky's story about when the streaker happened, I mean, if you're that athletic administrator and all of a sudden there's chickens on the floor, what in the world do you do? That is not a class you've attended of how to wrangle chickens. I just imagine being that person and saying, "Oh, here's a major issue. We got not just one, but 6 chickens running around here." And it probably from the administrator, it felt like probably 60, trying to figure out how am I going to corral all this? Well, the game still needs to go on. Oh, and by the way, everybody's laughing at you because you're chasing chickens. I'm thinking back to Rocky, and when he was trying to catch chickens back in the day of the Rocky movie, what that was like for that administrator.
I hear the clown music in my head, right? While I'm out there trying to wrangle these chickens, it's the clown music that's playing behind you.
And I feel this happened a bit ago. This wasn't recent, right?
Oh yeah, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah.
Can you imagine if this happened now? That would have been all over social media.
Yeah.
You would have been scrouched over.
Everybody's phones and that. Yeah,
everybody would have been out.
Yeah, the memes that would come out of that now, just from whether you're chasing it and you fail to catch the thing, and do you enlist help? Are you trying to? I mean, what do you use to catch them? I'm just trying to figure out how I would handle that now. If
where do you put them after you catch them?
Yeah, what do you do with them?
So I've thought about
Yeah.
this extensively, you guys. I swear I've thought about I've got a
Okay.
plan if anybody brings chickens back into our gym. Okay. We got to create the wall. We've got doors at one end of our gym, and we're just going to force them out those doors, and then they become free range chickens, right? they, they can just free range
Cole's
all over our
chicken
gym.
plan.
Yeah, you got it.
So you're not calling Colonel Sanders trying to get him there.
No,
I mean,
that'd be on social media too.
yeah, that would be too, or Chick-fil-A or anybody. But I think that I try to process just, you got emergency action plans. You've got things that you deal with if it's weather, if there's a bomb threat, but not any part of me prior to today has thought about. Well, I can't say prior to today.
I was just
This
gonna
last
say.
week, I can't say that I don't have a wildlife management plan, especially indoors. I'm not thinking about that.
hmm So for everyone listening, I think it's important for you guys to know that last week I got a text from Dustin, and it feels very appropriate to bring up right now that he had bats in his gymnasium, and he was running around with towels trying to catch bats. So indoor animal problems is a theme this week apparently. But it can be very real. Both of those are, I don't know. I would have to really think about how I was going to handle that. Those aren't things that I've had to experience, thankfully. But I'm sure there has been ADs who are listening that are like, "Oh yeah, tell you about my animals."
But think about putting yourself in that spot. What do you do if you're an administrator? What do you do? And Cole, if you're in that situation, I know you got a chicken plan now because you thought this through. But if that happened, how do you implement said plan without everybody else panicking or laughing or shrieking or whatever they're doing to get there? There'll be some people that are just highly afraid of whatever animal that is, and then you've got to remain calm as the administrator, and that may be a synopsis of our athletic administrator role is you got to remain calm in spite of the chaos.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. Like, yeah, I got a chicken plan, but how many colleges and high schools are still using live mascots, right? Like you're a bulldog, Dustin. I'm a bulldog too. And for my first couple of years, one guy loved to bring his bulldog as the unofficial mascot. And I finally had to say, you can't bring that dog anymore because what if this happens? What if that happens? Colorado buffaloes, they run a bison out on the football field. Like what happened? That's a multi-thousand-pound animal. What's going to happen if it gets out of control? I don't know. Those scenarios scare me, to be honest with you. Like for those people that are using live mascots.
You're not taking one for the team if Ralphie runs at you. You're not standing there and taking a charge in that deal.
Exactly.
I mean, I think about. I mean, and I live in Arkansas, and we've got schools that are the sand lizards. But what if somebody brought a lot of those in a rivalry game? I'm sure people have thought of some of those things and just turned all those loose.
Listen, don't give
In a
them
basketball
ideas.
game. I mean, I'm not trying to give ideas, but I just think about that stuff, and especially parlaying on what Cole's talking about. These are very real possibilities of things that could happen. Now, there is no possible way I can come up with every scenario. And if we rewinded this story back before whoever the administrator was at that point of that school, I am sure they never had a chicken plan. What if a student brings this chicken? But I think that shows the flexibility that we have to have as administrators, the calm and the chaos, but also being able to be flexible and think outside the box of stuff that may happen. I had kids ask me last week, "Hey, can we turn off? Can we pull the fire alarm if we win?" What? What part of you makes you think that's a great idea? And I think back to I'm thinking to Cole's story, both of his stories really, but this chicken story. At what point do those kids think this is a really good idea?
It's a great question. Um,
Sorry.
and the only thing I can say is that as athletic administrators, we control every detail that we possibly can. Yet there is, that's 25% of your of your game day or of your season or whatever. There's 75% of your year that you have no control over. You have no control over the officials, the weather, what students bring into the gym, for crying out loud, But we're talking about adolescent brains. If there's one person who's made me think deeply about how I interact with adolescents, I feel like I do that well anyway. But Jeremy Boone, man, that guy made me think. How do kids think? How do kids think? What is a kid thinking here? And sometimes they're not thinking much. So,
Right.
The decision making process doesn't necessarily last very long. It's just like, yeah, let's do this, on impulse.
Well, and I
What
think
I
an important takeaway from this is definitely for all ladies out there. If you have not done this yet, you should have your local wildlife management phone number in your phone. That is a number that I had in my phone for after what prompted me to do that and put it in there. And then wherever school I went to, I made sure I had the updated number. Was I got a call over the radio, and there was an alligator on the tennis court. They're like,
I'm
"Can you
out.
handle that?"
I'm out of alligators.
Sorry, what did you say? I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh
So,
man.
I mean, just us three in completely different areas. The bottom line is have wildlife management number saved into your phone because you're gonna need it one day.
Seriously. Hopefully never for alligators.
Right. Yeah, Mark Herrera could agree with you. I mean, he was on this before, and he said, "Yeah, Danielle may have great weather, but she's that alligators. You still got to deal with that." And I got to deal with mosquitoes that are you can saddle. I mean, the world's a little different in each part of the world, obviously, and you're dealing with different things. But I would have never thought I'd have to deal with bats. You would never thought, "Hey, I got to deal with chickens," and you didn't have that scenario. It's another story, but it paints a picture for wherever we're at. That's a very real possibility that students whose mindset may be that quick, hey, that's a great
Mhm.
thought. Let me run with that instead of where the three of us may sit back and say, let me think about every angle of this and think if that's a good idea. No, that's not a good idea at all. Our adult brain may be a little different. Now, sometimes I may be like that 17-year-old boy in the way he thinks and thinks, ha, 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 that'd be so much fun if we did that.
We are
The
laughing about
reality
it right
is,
now.
I mean, I can laugh right now because it didn't happen to me.
Yeah.
Well, as far as chickens are concerned, I deal with bats, and that's a whole nother thing. Um, but Cole, as you think about the pen that wasn't your issue, and now a chicken story that wasn't really your issue, but it could happen. Realistically, the result of what happened with the pen being thrown down was nothing that you did, but your job was to fix it. Not necessarily fix the pen and make it right. You had to fix the situation. And I think that's what we do as administrators. We've got to fix whatever problem there is, identify the problem, solve it. And sometimes that's that quick. Sometimes we've got to make that decision so quick to make everything right. And that's the question I got with the bats. Hey, where were you? And I'm thinking, there's not a class I've taken that says this is what you do when bats break out in your gym. There's not one LTI, and I'm not going to write one of those, but there's not anything that has trained you to be prepared for that situation. There is no class, I'm willing to bet, there's no class that you've taken that says, hey, Cole, when your coach does this, you do this. There's nothing that really prepares you for that. You just got to solve the problem. Um, if lights go out at your stadium, what do you do?
Yeah.
And you've got to solve
I have
that
an
problem.
emergency plan. Yeah, I have an emergency plan for that.
It's amazing to me. We had lights go out at our facility one time, and by the time I got from the press box to the football field, I had about 18 people say, "Do you know the lights are out?" So we had 18 electricians all of a sudden like, oh, no, I had no idea those were out.
Didn't
But then
notice.
I've got to solve the problem and fix it. So, it's amazing as an administrator just what you've got to do and how you've got to handle that. And I'm interested to hear just your perspective now, 12 years into this profession. We've talked about the lifespan being so short, but you're 12 years into it now. You look back on some of these scenarios, and maybe some of those situations have helped you prepare for what may be coming yet.
1,000% yes. And you hit it right on the head with the stadium lights going out. That happened to me probably 5 or 6 years ago, and had no plan in place, and now we do. You know what I mean? Like, it just, you react to these scenarios, and each one of them kind of prepares you a little differently. But then on top of that too, the chicken story wasn't mine. It was a friend of mine, right? And so hearing his chicken story now has me prepared to handle chickens in the gym. Like, it's in the back of the brain, and it's stored there in case it ever happens. Pray to God it doesn't. But like you said, there's just these experiences all somewhat weirdly prepare you to handle some of these different challenges. And we're just scratching the surface, and a lot of it's funny, but there's some really serious scenarios that you got to work through too. And those serious scenarios are those things that prepare you too. Never thought I'd have to deal with a coach misconduct situation. Been through that. But like you said, there's no. I got my master's degree in school administration. There is not one single course that prepared me for athletic administration when I got my principal degree. Right? I mean, it all happened on the job. I learned it all on the job. So I love the LTIs because they give you bits and pieces. But like you said, there's no LTI that says alligator removed from the tennis court, bat removal from the gym. Like, it doesn't do that.
Yeah, Larry the Cable Guy, I'll reference him just because I can relate to his mindset, but it's similar to alligator on the tennis court. If you want to put, he talks about shark bite suits, and whose idea was it to jump in there first and say, hey, this is a great idea. I'm going to let a shark bite me and see if this thing works. But Larry the Cable Guy says, you put that shark in the Walmart parking lot, I'll take it on every day. But you put me in the ocean, not doing it. I'm not getting in there with a shark. I'm not getting on his territory. And so I would have to think with an alligator, I don't know what his territory really is. Like, if he's dead, maybe then I'll take him on. But I'm not getting on him a tennis court, golf course, in a swamp. None of that stuff.
They're
and Danielle,
harmless,
you
guys.
may
They're
have
harmless.
expertise.
I was gonna say they're not as bad as you think. And I was in the center of the state then, so they're a little bit more dominant. Now I'm over on the coast, so we're more concerned about those sharks. I'd say over here. But yeah, no, it in our tennis court was completely fenced in. So like, and he couldn't figure out where the gates were to get out, and he was massive. There are pictures. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. And the poor alligator, because the courts were so hot. They were so hot. Like, he wanted out of there so badly, and he just couldn't figure it out. So yeah, it wasn't exactly a fun memory, but it happened, and the wildlife number is an important number to have.
Well, Happy Gilmore would say he was mad because he got all them teeth and no toothbrush. So maybe that's what he was looking for, is a toothbrush.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you very much, Cole, for being with us today. It was awesome talking to you, and I am probably gonna, steal a form of your cold chicken plan. I enjoyed that. But yeah, it was great speaking with you. And Dustin, you need to deal with your bats. Get that under control.
Unfortunately, we're still dealing with that. But man, Cole, I appreciate you jumping on here, and I appreciate your stories, because I think they're learning environments for everybody. But you've got some nuggets of wisdom in here that you can go back and look at as well for your own personal growth, and for anybody that may listen to this podcast has an opportunity to say, let me evaluate some things and say, and that really happened to somebody. And Doug Kilgore tells me all the time, learn from others' mistakes, because you're not going to make them all yourself. You just can't make them all yourself. So I'm not saying it was a mistake that you had to deal with, or that you did, but it's a situation that happened that I get to learn from. So I appreciate that insight that you provided, and I thank you for taking a chance on us, giving us a chance to laugh with you, not at you, but laugh with you in these stories that you've shared with us today, Cole.
Thank you, guys. I love this platform. I'm glad to connect with you guys. It's so much fun hanging out. I can't wait to do it in person again sometime soon.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Cole. And thank you to Ticket Spigot for making today's episode happen.